And welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Going for Two, presented by Home Field Apparel. I am your host, Matt Brown. I'm the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter. I'm joined here this evening by my colleague and friend, Bryan Fischer. We're recording this here on a Thursday evening to get that second edition here in this week. It's good to be back home. I didn't miss anything too big here, did I?
I don't think so, but unless you count maybe the biggest experiment on my Twitter timeline of Amazon streaming Thursday Night Football, that might be about it. But
Yeah.
it's
It
good to
seemed
have you back home.
Yeah, I've seen this. I've seen the same tweets. I haven't been watching the game. I've been. I'm going to be honest with everybody. NBA 2K came out last week, and that is the video game that I probably play the most out of everything outside of whenever college football comes back. A lot of my old SB Nation colleagues are really into it. A bunch of my college friends are into it. So I'm probably not watching an NFL game that I don't care about. As much.
I mean, are you like are you buying an NBA League Pass, or are you that in depth
I,
with
I
that?
I am that into it. I This year the NBA two the highest level package came bundled with League Pass, and I don't know if you heard this or not. My Cleveland Cavaliers just traded for one Donovan Mitchell, and the team looks pretty good. And so I'm happy to have League Pass now, so I can watch a couple more of those out of market games. Um, Maybe once college football season's over. I'm not going to watch a lot of regular season NBA basketball in late November, early December, unfortunately. But I'm sure we'll all be wonderful. But that's not why you all tuned into this today. To be talking about video games and basketball, I wanted to check in a little bit because, as you may be aware, if you've been reading Extra Points, which I think most of you do, I was in Washington, D.C. the past couple of days. I went to go to the Lead One fall meetings, which is a big athletic director palooza. I found some time to go back to my old quasi alma mater for a little bit. I spent some time at American University, went through their athletic department tour and talked with some staffers, and maybe that's a different thing. But
No, I want to stay on the American reunion here. I know everybody's tuned in to see all the details about the Lead One meeting, but we're going to get to that in a second.
sure, no,
How was the return trip to the alma
we
mater?
can talk some Patriot League. I'm gonna be honest. It was a little bit strange. So for those who are unfamiliar with American, which I'm guessing is almost everybody, even if you live in the DMV, American University plays in the Patriot League. They are a Division One institution. They're located in the Tenleytown neighborhood on the northwest side of Washington, D.C. For those who are unfamiliar, that is one of the fanciest pants, richest residential neighborhoods in the city. When I was a student there, the lore was that Karl Rove was his fancy house was near campus, and he was the one that would complain if frat parties got too loud, or the toniest political consultant class. So that's important because you have a very concentrated geographic campus that can't really expand. It's some of the same problems that a Northwestern has, or other places that are in more residential, higher end neighborhoods. There's none of Americans' athletic fields have lights. Like there are sound ordinances. So they were telling me like the field hockey team can't even have like a PA announcement if the games goes on past like 3 o'clock because the rich people are going to complain. So you already have a couple of things stacked against you. AU has a pretty small athletic department. They don't have a baseball team. They don't have men's lacrosse. They certainly don't have football. They haven't had that for 100 years. And you play in a relatively small, very on-campus arena. And I was a little surprised. I mean, some of the things have changed. They built a couple other academic buildings, but most athletic facilities are exactly the same as I remember them from 2005, 2006. And this is not a criticism, right? Like it's a low major school, and it's one that's resourced like a low major institution, and they're able to be competitive in some sports. American will probably kick your ass in field hockey. I think as of right now, they're a top 25 program. They've been solid in women's volleyball. They've had some success in wrestling, but it's going to be near the bottom, despite a university that costs roughly $11 gajillion to attend, which I can say maybe not the best investment unless you're planning on working for in international politics or in the C-SPAN Wonkaverse. Which is which is what I thought I wanted to do when I was 18. Before I got there and realized this sucks. But that is your life. If you do want to be a C-SPAN person, American University may be a great institution for you. But I
I
think,
don't think
yeah.
the old alumni network is going to give you a call after that
Listen.
introduction.
They dropped my scholarship when I went to go on a mission. So if they wanted me to be part of the alumni network, maybe they should have let me, help me keep my scholarship so I could have graduated. What is fascinating to me about that school, and I am glad I got to talk to them, because there are plenty of things worth celebrating, right? I think AU is an example of a kind of institution that, should things with the transformation committee or should things with college athletics change very significantly over the next decade, this would be an example of a school that I think would have some difficult conversations to have. And it's not because that they'd be incapable of competing at the Division I level. I don't think there's anything that George Washington does that American couldn't do if they wanted to. But this is a student body, and this is not an insult, that generally doesn't think college sports is that important to them. It's a really international student body. It's one that's very focused on government work and policy work and the DC classroom. And you don't go there generally because you want a Big Ten athletic kind of experience, which is fine. The university has other priorities. So if suddenly the cost of doing business doubles, or if you need to have you fully fund all of your scholarships, which is something that American doesn't do, uh, maybe you have different conversations. Just, American hasn't been a Division I school for 150 years, right? Like it's relatively recent, all things considered. They could do it, sure, but I could also see that administration saying this doesn't fit with our priorities, because we don't need this for enrollment. We're not trying to we're not really recruiting a ton of students this way. We don't need this to hit our tuition goals. We can find students either way. We're not winning the Patriot League in every sport right now anyway, nor are we really trying to? Well, we're trying, but you know what I mean. It's their resource allocation and what Holy Cross is doing are not the same thing. And I say this not as like an insult. I don't think that we a poor decision, but this would be an example of a school that I could see making different choices if things break a certain way in a couple of years. And there are dozens of schools just like AU.
Well, and they only sponsor 14 teams, and I think
Yeah.
sports sponsorship is going to be one of the kind of big topics over the next probably 6 weeks or so, as the transformation committee really dives into that topic, starts circulating, kind of some surveys and whatnot regarding that, and it's going to affect a lot more schools than just saying an American, because it goes to your makeup of your conference, and if you drop below some certain minimums in that area, you could be kind of scrambling if you're some of these conferences that are kind of right at the below line. Was talking to somebody about Cal State Bakersfield the other day, and their wrestling programs in the Pac-12. Well, if there's some sort of realignment involving the Pac-12 or sports sponsorship minimums get dropped, that's no longer a Pac-12 sport anymore. So you're looking for a new home. So like there's a lot of that kind of stuff kind of sitting in the background of all this D1 transformation as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I wouldn't say that institutionally Bakersfield and American have a lot in common, but in terms of where their athletic department could go, or contingency plans for X, Y, Z, G, and Q, there are some similarities, right? There are some campuses where, all right, we could start a wrestling program because we already have those facilities, and the startup costs for wrestling or beach volleyball or indoor track are not necessarily exorbitant. And there are other places where you just can't build another building. And maybe you send your athletes all the way across town for some shared facility with Georgetown or Howard or something. Probably not. And that becomes a challenge. I would imagine if you were in Long Island, or if you were in Queens or in Manhattan, or in the north side of Chicago, where space is at a premium, these could be challenges there too. Not everybody can grab the land to go build another 3,000 person arena. If you're in Philadelphia, maybe. So those are things to monitor, which I think it kind of dovetails into the real reason I was there. It wasn't to get taken off the American University Christmas card list, although I might have. Bender's fine. Like there's other things that are very fine, but all the or several Division I FBS athletic directors all gathered together to talk about the future of college football governance. We've talked about it on this show several months ago. So if you've been following along, you might recall Gene Smith, Ohio State's AD, back in May, openly floating the idea of, hey, maybe it makes sense to move all of the college football stuff into the college football playoff or into some separate entity. And once he said that, you heard a couple other ADs and a couple other administrators kind of openly just asking questions, kind of talk about that. And in May and early June, and I think this was probably your experience too, Brian, this was something that was talked about because there is widespread dissatisfaction with the way the NCAA is set up right now from a football's perspective. And a lot of those concerns are not unique to football. I think if we called up our friends at Bakersfield or quite frankly, in half the Patriot League, you would hear similar concerns about it takes forever to get anything done, whether that's about NIL or about recruiting calendars, whether that's about COVID, any kind of new policy is the bureaucracy is not set up for quick legislation. And with courts and state houses and other external factors moving very quickly, there is a pretty broad consensus at the FBS administrative level that we can't do what we're doing. So then that begs the question, should we just move things somewhere else? And I remember leading up to this, I would talk to ADs and I intellectually understood the argument, but I wasn't entirely clear exactly how this moving out of the NCAA would solve all of those things, because the ADs are still there, the presidents are still there, and the commissioners are still there. Maybe you have a centralized point person, but you're still building a similar system. And after talked to a ton of people at Lead One, after all of those meetings, it would appear they reached a somewhat similar conclusion. Wrote about this on Thursday, but the stated preference of that group is we would like to reform the NCAA. We would like to streamline legislative properties within the NCAA. We do not want to move. We're not saying that we won't move at a later date if we can't fix stuff internally, but that is our preference. And I don't know. I mean, you may have known about this before I even went to DC, Brian. But as I understand it, one of the significant reasons for that is, turns out leaving the NCAA is going to be real expensive.
And something that the CFP really has kind of said, what, maybe we don't want to do this. I think there was also kind of that reception as well. On the other end, it's like, no, we really don't want to house all the rules making and be responsible for a lot of that. I think that was kind of part of it as well, especially after presidents kind of met and decided upon an expansion. But it was a concept that I think definitely got some traction, over the summer, like you were saying, and then it just has fizzled out. I think these last couple of weeks, I think obviously attention has turned to other things like transformation. Now that the college football playoff is off the plate, I think everybody's kind of comfortable with things as they are. And, I think it's important to note that, there could be some tweaks and some changes here or there, the football oversight committee, that they're responsible for everything. They're worried about FCS and how the postseason playoff is set up for that sport. Maybe it does make sense to kind of separate things out like that. And rulemaking is so sometimes in the NCAA it can go pretty fast. Relatively speaking to the history of the NCAA when it comes to things like that. I think they would like some things to go a little bit faster, but even when they say that they want things to go faster and they want to be more nimble about rulemaking and all that, you got to keep in mind that when that does end up happening, there's been some things that the D1 Council has done in terms of basically kind of being able to pass kind of new rules within about a month and a half. And that has drawn some ire too, in terms of, hey, wait a minute, you guys passed that way too quick. We didn't even get to talk about that. Let's hold on a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect of things too. But I think everybody would like, I guess, just to be able to be a little bit more nimble. And we kind of saw that years ago when moved to this current structure where the autonomy 5, as they like to call themselves, not the Power 5, the autonomy 5, where they have a little bit more leeway. And I think everybody kind of envisions something similar to that for FBS itself.
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, for me to dig into how the parallel work with the transformation committee and what's happening here with Lead One and on the football specific side. And Greg and Julie were there to get to brief that membership of some other updates, other conversations that were happening on that front. They're not part and parcel of the same thing. And I know fans should be aware of that, but they are talking about some pretty similar things. And not just in terms of how quickly can we move, but how where we're drawing dividing lines, what membership looks like, these same kind of similar issues. The one thing that I wrote about very briefly, and once more of these interviews, I think, get cut up and put on Collegiate Sports Connect, and everyone can see the full context, that I think might be interesting, is I asked everybody I possibly could on camera. I think we got close to 10 people across a wide swath of FBS. I asked every single person, what is the collegiate model now? And where do you draw your proverbial red line? Because clearly, when you ask an administrator what the collegiate model is now, and you compare that to what that meant a decade ago, they're different things. And now the collegiate model, like it or not, includes levels of compensation. It includes services offered by athletic departments that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. And yet people are still watching games. And so far, the enterprise hasn't collapsed completely. So I asked everyone, like, all right, what is like the one thing that is non-negotiable, knowing that you're not in complete control of what this model looks like right now? And I was expecting to hear some defensive amateurism, or like, we can't do pay for play or unionization or something. I got to tell you, I didn't hear that very often. A couple of people did, and they, some of them were P5 people, some of them were not. But what I did hear from almost everybody was, we think, the red line is that it has to be centered around education, and it has to be experience centered. And we understand that some compensation stuff will change, and some organizational things here will change. But in order for this to still be college football, from our perspective, college still has to be involved. And we look at this enterprise, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, as a massive scholarship program. College sports is a bigger scholarship program than just about anything else we have academically in this country. And I kind of thinking about this on the heels of what Mark Emmert was talking about at University of Florida a few days ago, talking to our friend Christy Dosh's class, where Mark was floated the idea of, in the future, all college athletes could be paid as brand ambassadors and serve as quasi marketing in that marketing function for athletic departments. They're not employees, but they're all getting a direct check, and that could still function in the collegiate model. To a hardliner, that would be like, what the hell are you even thinking? Of course, that makes a mockery of this. But I look at this now and think, I'm getting the idea that more leaders, particularly leaders under 55, would be more comfortable with those kind of changes than maybe they might have been even 18 months ago. Like the Overton window, I think, of what is possible vis-a-vis compensation has shifted quite a bit. Does that track with the kind of conversations you've been having?
Yeah, I think especially the age line of demarcation.
Yeah.
I think there's a big gap between the two halves, I guess you could say there. And I think a lot of it does come up to upbringing, but also just kind of the last couple of years and how
Sure.
the NCAA fought against NIL, and then it was here, and then it's like the enterprise did not collapse. So maybe if we actually were forward thinking and we could get ahead of things, maybe we can control it just a little bit, unlike NIL right now. I think that's also part of the impetus. It's just like, maybe if we kind of get a grips on, sharing revenue with the players and stuff like that. Or, I would anticipate later this year, as during bowl season, that you're going to have a few NIL opportunities for a lot of these players to kind of market your bowl or whatnot, to kind of be, essentially NIL opportunities there. I think the bottom line is they don't necessarily want the courts. They don't necessarily want Congress to have to rely on them as they sort out the very complicated issue of this whole amateurism and paying the players and that sort of thing that is still kind of left unsaid. Several court cases to that effect already. We're already seeing some new bills in Congress. So like, I think part of it is also just kind of like, let's get ahead of this. Let's not have to just really sit around and let our industry kind of get dictated to us. Let's actually start to do something proactive. And so I think that's also part of it. And I think the younger ADs understand that a little bit more than the others.
I think that's exactly right. And the NIL comparison is one that was made explicitly to me as an example of why expedited legislation here is important. Because, well, we saw what happened when we sat on our hands for a little bit, and nobody's happy with that situation. And quite frankly, I mean, and that, clearly nobody's happy within like the AD world, but coaches are even less happy, and even agents and compliance people and athletes I think, would have preferred all of this maybe end in a different place had different decisions have been made 6-7 years ago. Like, this is better than we had before. It wasn't the best possible system that could have been created. Let's try to prevent that. The other thing, and I recognize that by me saying this, it is possible, perhaps even probable, that some of this is just AD talk or putting on for, there's a camera on here and I don't know this reporter super well, so I'm going to project something different. But there was a feeling of optimism from this group that I wasn't really expecting. And I think part of that is because this is an opportunity where, even though they're all extremely competitive and they have very different athletic departments, to experience some congeniality and some shared sense of purpose that maybe they don't get in a lot of other positions. Maybe they had some really good programming. I know a little bit about what was discussed outside of college governance in those conversations about NIL and about academic programming and finances. Maybe those things went well, but there have been times that I've gotten people on the phone when folks are feeling a little bit more apocalyptic. That really wasn't what we were getting, at that hotel, in and around those meetings. So good sign, maybe. We'll see.
Well, I think just the now that we're kind of back in season, especially football season, I do feel like that collegiality thing kind of comes together just a little bit because everybody understands, everybody's living week to week, Saturday to Saturday, and there's a lot going on. And then you kind of think, maybe this isn't so bad. We got packed stadiums back. Donors are cutting checks again. We're entertaining, and bringing student athletes on to campus for the first time and seeing freshmen kind of grow up before eyes. So I feel like just the season itself kind of lends itself to that. But you're right. I do feel like that was something that was started kind of going back a few months even into the summer. Just the momentum, in terms of the changes are here and we're going to be okay. And it doesn't help, for some of the maybe the Big Ten ADs that were there. They know what kind of big checks are coming their way too down the road. That probably didn't hurt their optimism on the future here.
I think that's true. I mean, right? Like one of the people we interviewed for Connect that I got a chance to talk to for a while, Jeff Bourne at James Madison. Unquestionably, I think he has lots of reasons to be smiling right now, and even independent of a solid start here for his football program. But like he's experiencing the culmination of changes they've been pushing for a decade, and that's finally happened. You talk to folks at Old Dominion, you can see why they would be excited right now, coming off of a big upset, a strong showing against ECU. You've got the dog that's set to become the next great internet meme, and you have capital project momentum happening here. You can see why people at Kansas State are excited. Many of the people that I think would be less likely to be, humming to themselves, they were connecting on Zoom. So right, like, I didn't see Trev Alberts. I assume he's very busy right now. That doesn't say he wasn't participating, but I mean, like he doesn't have an hour and a half to hang around the cocktail hour, like maybe some other people. That's okay too. So like, I'm all in all, like I'm glad I got a chance to go. I'm glad I got a chance to talk to a bunch of people that I have only known via text messages and Zoom calls and over the phone. I think it's nice for them to also see that I own pants and own some things that are not just home field apparel, and am capable of talking. And it's nice to get out of my basement and back to a place where, as much as I have complained about DC on in Extra Points and on social media and elsewhere, like I did live there for a long time. There are a lot of happy memories, and a cool college place to be for sure. Speaking of home field, let's quickly talk about that here, because in these kind of events, you have to wear a coat and tie and an Oxford shirt and everything, and have to be a serious professional. And unfortunately, our dear friends at Home Field don't make those things yet. If you are a sponsor that does make those things, I would love to shill for you when I go to these functions. But what Home Field does make is almost everything else. Extremely comfortable t-shirts, hoodies, crew necks, tank tops, stickers, which aren't a thing that you wear unless you want to be really ambitious, or like you're our kids who will take those and turn them into pants. But they make great shirts. They're officially licensed. They're vintage collegiate apparel. They have a bunch of fun logos. I'm wearing the Bow Down to Washington shirt again here. We got Pistol Pete. My daughters go to a school called the Huskies, and there was a big school fundraiser today, so I felt like I had to represent the big grown-up, big dog.
Hey, big game for Washington coming up too.
Sure, very, 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 very big game. Should be a lot of fun. Excited to see what Michigan State is at this point. I feel like we don't really know yet. They've got just about everybody. They've been refreshing a bunch of other schools that they already had, and also dropping some new mid-majors. I think there's a really cool MAC collection that's been released a couple of days here this week. Yeah. I literally can't buy any more shirts. Connor, if you're listening to this and you send me more shirts, I don't have room to put them.
You can send them to me, Connor. Don't worry.
Send them to Fisher. Because
loving those new national title shirts in particular.
The national title ones. I mean, like the Eastern Michigan one looks pretty good. Everyone looks good in that dark green. Yeah. You know who else would look good in those shirts? You, dear listener. So when you buy them, use promo code EXTRAPOINTS to save 15% off that first order at homefieldapparel.com. We're excited to debut some new sponsors next week. We do also have some advertising, a little bit of advertising space open left in October. We're actually bringing on a couple of new sponsors with on Extra Points and this show. But if you would like us to discuss your brand, with a couple of exceptions, we can't shill for narcotics, or like
I like how that's exactly where you go first. I'm not going to say anything about that.
I meant like or regulated financial instruments that require certain disclosures. We are happy to talk about most things, and you can do that by dropping me a note at matt@extrapointsmb.com or sales@extrapointsmb.com. Yeah, you can tell it's been a week, right after, but this is I think it's good to put a bow on what's happening here administratively here behind the scenes. Should be an exciting week 3. Similar to week 2, not a ton of games that immediately jump off the page screaming you have to watch this, but because college football is, and I say this with deep love in my heart, very stupid. That means that many of those things that you would think that you could safely just check on Twitter while you're doing other things will become something that requires your immediate attention, like an App State, Texas A&M from last week. It's not just going to be about the Michigan State, Washington, Texas A&M, Miami, or BYU, Oregon games. There'll be plenty else to watch. I'm not just saying that because I will be watching the Toledo, Ohio State game.
Should be fun, right? On Fox.
Yeah. And Ohio State's going to be on a night a lot this year, which is good for my noon football experiences, not as good for my anxiety levels in the evening. But you should not be thinking.
Are you one to have trouble going to sleep after getting hyped up? Watching
honestly,
those primetime games.
I have a harder time going to sleep, even if my favorite team isn't playing at this point, because generally there's some kind of adrenaline-ish game, and I don't do a good job of regulating my caffeine intake, I think, on Saturdays. I say that as I'm sipping a Diet Coke right now at 9:00 at night Central Time, because I have a bunch of other stuff I have to do. I have to do elsewhere. But I generally on Saturdays, if I watch the late game, I'm not going to bed until 1. It takes a little while.
I still don't get how some of the people on the East Coast do it. Like I feel like at least on the West Coast, the games are over unless you're really diehard into Hawaii. You can at least relax a little bit. There's kind of some breathing time before it really gets late in the hour, but it can be tough to kind of wind down, and especially if you're watching like the NBA and it's like 1:30 in the morning. I don't know how you kind of come down from that, but you're in the great time zone of the Central Time, so you got a little bit better.
God's time zone. It is a little bit better, but do I have like some white noise queued up on YouTube or something if things get weird at midnight? Yeah, it was a little bit easier when I was younger and my kids were younger, because like, and you know what this is like, right? It doesn't really matter how I feel. If the 18-month-old wants to stay up to watch Washington State's 10:00 kickoff, by God, we're going to watch Washington State. But my kids are old enough now where they will go to bed. I mean, I might have to temporarily put the fear of God into them for them to stay asleep, but they will. I mean, like, I don't have to stay up that late every single time. If I was living out here and I was like a diehard Cal fan, this would be a challenging lifestyle for sure.
Well, I know a few folks that put up with it and do stick up and stay awake at least late enough to hit some of those Pac-12 games. But it'll be fun. I think it's going to be one of those weekends, like you said. On paper it kind of looks so, but those are always the weeks of chaos. And I doubt we're going to get a coach firing after the end of it on Sunday. But you never know. You never know how things are going to go.
I hope not. I hope that the coach fire in week 3, week 4 is a rare event rather than like moving up the window entirely that early. But that's a different show.
I don't think so. I do think that might be here to stay. Especially for those coaches that do come back, and maybe it's like everybody understands you are the guy on the hot seat. You know what? Chances are the last 2 years that guy has been gone by week 3. So I'm not really thinking that kind of thing is going to change. The curious thing to me is just kind of certainly at the lower levels. Are you going to kind of keep those coaches around? It's a bit different now just because there are transfer windows. It's not like your team's going to enter the portal in mass. At this point. So I think that has changed things a little bit, but come November, I'm going to be very curious. Our coach is going to make a lot of moves, or AD is going to make a lot of moves just on coaches, because they know, hey, you know what? I got 10 days until the window. I can get somebody in here. They can recruit the portal before it's kind of mass chaos in December, and then we can kind of go from there. So it's still going to be a different coaching carousel this year, but we'll see if it adds another name to the wall there on Sunday.
Yeah, let's tackle that in 2 weeks, unless something profoundly stupid happens. Which, of course, by me saying that, I have now manifested it and set the show schedule here for next Wednesday, folks. We appreciate you spending some time here this week with us across all of our platforms. You can, of course, find a lot of our other video content on Collegiate Sports Connect. That is free. There should be anywhere between 6 to 10 interviews from Lead One that I conducted over they'll either be up on Friday or Monday. We're in the process of clipping and editing those. We have a couple other NIL stories on that platform coming up. And then, of course, on Extra Points, which you can find at extrapointsmb.com. Well, I'm juggling like 6 different stories at the moment. I think there's going to be a religion-oriented newsletter for early next week. I am cautiously optimistic we'll get enough information for another EA Sports update. Saw our buddy Chris Vanini had recently had one on the Athletic that was very useful and well appreciated. We got a couple of different NIL stories here. I'm talking Barstool on Friday. We have a couple other ones coming out later in the week, so you can grab it all at extrapointsmb.com. And of course, if you're 30 minutes into this show, if you haven't already, take a minute or two, hit the 5-star button, help leave a sacrifice to the algorithmic gods, because this is not a show that's going to reach 300,000 people every time we do it. That's just because we talked for 25 minutes today about bureaucratic legislative changes. Help us find the degenerate nerds that we're looking for. That 5-star button helps a bunch. Did I get everything, Brian?
I think so. And, speaking of Lead One and all those ADs, one of the first things they read every morning, one of the first things they do in the evening is read the D1 ticker. So make sure you subscribe to that. We also had another edition of HeadCoachU go out this week with Bronco Mendenhall. We kind of talked about what he looks for in a program, kind of how he builds a culture, initially. So I think that's really a good thing that for a lot of ADs out there that are either in the process of hiring or have hired in the past, something maybe a bit of a different perspective on kind of that whole thing. And so there'll be another edition of that next Tuesday. And then have some column over the weekend and on Monday from foxsports.com. So that seems to wrap it all up.
It's going to be fun. Everyone, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your football. Enjoy your volleyball. Enjoy your soccer. Enjoy your farmers markets. We'll be in touch with you here in a couple more days.